Hi, my name is Craig Copeland, Tech Alliance Director for Synack, and this is Cut to the Chase. Proactive security testing should never be an afterthought when releasing a new application, updating source code, or migrating resources to the cloud. Synack security testing helps you find exploitable vulnerabilities before bad actors do, along with recommendations and verifications to close those security gaps. But while security testing is critical to maintaining cyber health, too often, it's a siloed activity by red teams, not well coordinated with the broader SecOps team and their workflows. But it doesn't have to be that way. The new Synack app for Splunk exposes the value of Synack's strategic security testing data into the Splunk platform that you already use today. By leveraging Splunk's capabilities, Synack data becomes easy to search, filter, pivot, visualize, and trend. So with that, I'd like to start with a demo, and I will share my screen. And I'm going to begin with a view of the Synack platform. So this is a list of the results of some of the security tests that Synack has conducted. This is called a list of exploitable vulnerabilities. One of the key differences with Synack is we go beyond automated security scanning, leveraging an expert team of vetted security searchers called the Synack Red Team. So they go and do deep security testing and provide a lot of details of their findings. So this is a list. And for example, I'll open one of them here as an example, and we'll look at one of the exploitable vulnerability reports. So you'll see here, it tells you about what the vulnerability is, the impact, what locations are vulnerable to this exploit, and more details like how the security researcher was able to conduct this exploit and expose it, along with the recommended fix. And the recommended fix is really important because this gives you, the security practitioner, the information you need to close the security gaps before an actual bad actor could exploit them. Now, this detailed report is very valuable. The Synack data is invaluable to your security operations environment. But the Splunk integration that I'm going to show you in a moment lets the broader SecOps team find those relevant strategic security insights in the Splunk platform. So with that, I'll return and have a look at the Synack app for Splunk. So the Synack app for Splunk has a variety of dashboards. I'm showing you here the first one, which is the Strategic Insights dashboard. So this gives a high-level view of the Synack data for all the security tests that we've conducted recently and over time, for whatever time period you specify in Splunk. We can see the total number of exploitable vulnerabilities. We can see the categories of those vulnerabilities. We can see the different types, and we can see the severity levels of each of those by each category. Furthermore, we can look at the different assessments and how vulnerable they are. In Synack parlance, an assessment relates to an asset being tested, such as a host or a web asset, for example. And then we have remediation information too, which talks about the efficacy. When things are found, how well are they being fixed? Are they being fixed right the first time? The different categories being fixed or not fixed. So this gives a high-level view in Splunk of all of Synack's strategic security testing data, which will be invaluable. And of course, this data is available to the broader SecOps organization, which might not be the ones who are looking at the Synack platform itself on a day-to-day basis. So this opens up the data to a broad audience in the security team. And of course, sharing and collaborating data is key to success in any security operation. So with that, let me drill down now on some of the details of the more specific dashboards available in the Synack app for Splunk. Firstly, let me start with the suspected vulnerabilities dashboard. So suspected vulnerabilities are the results of scans. I mentioned earlier, the difference between scanning and human-led testing. Synack also does scanning, but our scanning and the triage that goes along with it is a means to an end to narrow down the alert noise, to inform some information to help make decisions on what the security researchers should test. So for example, here we see the different criticality levels. We see different domains of affected web assets, for example. We can further filter by CVEs or other metrics, and we can sort these. For example, if we narrow down to criticality, we see a shorter list. And then we also see some metrics here in terms of what's qualified. Qualified means that it's something that would be suitable for the Synack researchers to test further. So this is what we call triage. We're triaging the alerts, we're narrowing down what to look at. Once that's been done, I'll pivot back to the exploitable vulnerability metrics dashboard in Splunk. This is showing information about all the tests that the Synack Red Team undertook. These are the human security experts doing the testing. And unlike suspected vulnerabilities, which are a scan of things that you might need to worry about, that might be exploitable in your environment, this dashboard is showing things that were actually able to be exploited by the security researchers. So when something's suspected, you don't know. A firewall may be able to stop it, a WAF might stop it, an endpoint might be able to stop it, but exploitable means it was able to bypass all those things and our researchers were able to exploit it. So of course, those are much more relevant and worthy of being looked at. So the Splunk dashboard allows you to look at the big picture of all the exploits that have been tested by Synack in your environment. Furthermore, we can narrow it down with the help of this dashboard of things that we are interested in looking at. So for example, here we have the different metrics categorized by type of exploit, as well as criticality. So we see here that some of them, like a denial of service, in this case of low criticality, maybe that's not something that we're going to want to look at first. On the other hand, cross-site scripting with high severity would be something that warrants a more urgent look. So for example, I'm going to click on that, and in Splunk, it's going to filter that data. We now see a much shorter list of that Synack results, which we can have a look at. So we're narrowing down the scope of what our security team needs to take action on. Once we do so, we can open up a particular vulnerability and we can pivot back to Synack. So this is, again, one of the detailed reports that I was speaking about earlier. It has the impact, it has the steps to reproduce, it has the recommendation. And I'd like to talk a little bit about recommendations and the concept of patch verification. So this is a recommendation by our security researchers of something the customer should do to resolve this issue. When a security researcher is testing, it's in review. Once they've provided their results, they will put it into a patch pending mode. This is telling the customer, I've done my work, here's your recommendation, and then it waits for the customer to implement that recommendation. Once the recommendation has been implemented, the issue can then be put into a closed fix mode. This is going to trigger a new event in Synack called a request for patch verification. So in this case, this will prompt the Synack Red Team members to retest this issue. And by the way, one of the benefits of Synack is it's not just one researcher. We have a pool of security experts who are looking at your assets. So you're getting diversity of thought, and they're going to have lots of eyes to see different things. And the patch verification, in this case, will follow up on something that was already identified before. So this closed loop cycle makes sure that vulnerabilities not only are identified and recommendations provided, but that remediation is actually occurring. And with that, I'd like to go back to the Synack app for Splunk and highlight another one of the dashboards called response metrics. So at a high level, with response metrics, you can answer questions like, my CISO wants to know which security gaps are getting fixed and how fast. They want to have proof that things that are being identified are actually being fixed. So this dashboard provides you some metrics in that area. So for example, again, we can look at criticality. We can also look at other things like category. So when I pivot to the category, I see that the different categories of exploits that were found in the customer's environment, they're getting very different numbers of average days to remediation. So content injection, for example, from the start to finish, from when it's been found, when the recommendation has been provided, the customer is fixed, and when that's gone back into the patch verification queue, the time to fix everything is taking 17 days, which is much more modest than some of the others, such as cross-site scripting. So if I look at cross-site scripting, or if I look at information disclosure, I see a much longer period of time. So this is giving the security practitioners areas to focus on where there needs to be some work done to improve that response time and that remediation. In that regard, there's another metric here. I showed this on the Strategic Insights dashboard a little bit earlier. Not only is the amount of time to remediate important, but the efficacy is important too. Efficacy means when an exploitable vulnerability has been identified, is it being fixed right the first time? So the recommendation has been provided. Has that been properly followed? And has the fix been effective the first time? If it's effective the first time, your remediation is going to be 100%. So we see here for some assets, it's 100%. Now for this one though, it was only about 28%. So that one isn't doing as well. Likewise, it's broken down here by category. So we see that certain categories like cross-site scripting are getting fixed right 67% of the time, but this SQL injection is only 33%. So this is giving some clues about what's being fixed, but it's also giving some proof, this metrics and the other ones in the response time dashboard, that things are actually being fixed. So it gives some evidence so that your SecOps team won't get burned about things that were found but were never fixed. Now, for example, here we're seeing ones over here at the bottom that just aren't getting fixed at all. So we have some data to show what's being fixed and what's not, so that you don't get dinged later when they say, we found this, why didn't you fix it? Looking back at the exploitable metrics dashboard, I wanted to show another feature of this app. This is bringing in the Synack data. Now, of course, Splunk excels at looking at data, bringing in data over time, allowing you to search it, and aggregating and consolidating the data. So the app makes use of the Synack data and the Splunk capabilities to provide you trends. So is the security posture getting worse or better? So I'm going to further narrow this down by particular assets. For example, I'm going to look at one of the assets in this assessment, and we see here that it's green. There was only a couple of exploits found, and that is stable. It's not going up or down, hence it's green. But if I switch to a different assessment asset, this particular host, for example, we see here that there are a number of exploits being found, and the trend is going up in most cases. So this is one that's getting worse, not better. So this provides an area of focus, and for example, an SQL injection that we might want to look at on this particular host. And then, of course, we can pivot back to the Synack for the details. So this is narrowing down where our security posture isn't trending in the right direction, so we can act on it as security practitioners. Now, of course, one of the other benefits of Splunk is the ability to search the raw data itself. So that is also available. We can search the Synack data. We can look at, and I'll go back to a search that I ran recently. We can go back and we can look at recent data from searches of all the assessments in the Synack index. Let me go into verbose mode to get a little more information. And we see here a number of events. We see all these details. Again, we could pivot back to Synack. But what I wanted to show you here is that there have been 38 exploitable vulnerabilities found by Synack. And here we see different vulnerability locations. And for example, we see this one here, 248, 252, 142, 161. This one has been found to be vulnerable. So at this point, it might be interesting as a security practitioner to search not only the Synack index, but also the other indexes that you have in your Synack platform and have a look at that vulnerable asset. So I'm not going to get into all the details here, but what I wanted to show you is that now we see 165 events. We're seeing information in Splunk around many more events and pieces of information around this vulnerable asset. And if you look at this information, you can get insights on what action might need to be taken, and you can leverage those recommendations that were provided by Synack about that vulnerable asset to take action. So in other words, what we're doing here is we're correlating the red team data with the blue team data that is being brought in and looked at by all the other parts of the organization that are utilizing Splunk. And that allows us to focus our remediation efforts to be able to close vulnerabilities even faster, and to not just look at test data, but to look at the vulnerable assets in the real world. Because of course, combining test and real world data together is very important, and that's going to lead to the best results. So Splunk and Synack make a perfect pair in this regard. Synack's security testing data, along with Splunk's ability to look at all of the data in a customer's SecOps environment. There's one more of the Synack app for Splunk dashboards, which I would like to show you now. This is called the Assessment Metrics Dashboard. So assessments are, roughly speaking, assets which the Synack security researchers are testing. So there are different types of assets. There are mobile assets, host assets, and there are web applications. For example, let's drill down on the web applications. And we see that the different web applications have different numbers of vulnerabilities. Some of them don't have any, some of them just have one. But this one here in particular, I see that it has 25. So that's going to be one that I'm going to want to look at more closely. So this is giving some information about the web asset. But then if I look at the list of exploitable vulnerabilities for this particular asset, now we see some interesting things. For example, we see a lot of them here that are saying patched failed. So these are ones that were identified, the recommendations were provided, but they're not getting fixed properly. And that might be one of the reasons why we see so many vulnerabilities. They're just kind of building up over time. So now, of course, you could come into the Synack platform like we've done here, and you could search through it and you could find some of this information. But we were able to see this quickly and narrow down on something that was important by looking at this data in the Splunk app. So Splunk is really good for this purpose, and it adds some value to the abilities that you already have with the Synack platform. So let's go back here, and for example, we found one in the list. We have a particular vulnerability like cross-site request forgery. We have a detail report from Splunk, and again, the value of Synack strategic security testing is that it goes beyond what a scan will tell you, which is relatively simple, high-level information about a vulnerability, to provide you full details about what was done, how you do it, and recommendations on how to fix it. Now, going back to the Splunk app, the value of the Synack app for Splunk is it makes it easy to work with Synack strategic security testing data. And the data is no longer just siloed to a red team audience anymore. It's really opened up to the broad SecOps team, including the blue team and others in the SecOps organization. So to conclude, security testing is a vital part of proactive cybersecurity strategy. You can find exploitable vulnerabilities before bad actors do by testing. But what you don't want to do is to let the data get lost in a compliance report or seen only by the red team. So as good as the Synack platform is, there's a lot of value to combine that capability with the search, analysis, and visualization capabilities of Splunk to effectively make use of the security testing data to close security gaps quickly. The Synack app for Splunk is available in Splunk base, and we invite you to download and make use of that in your Splunk and Synack deployment. And of course, we invite you to contact Synack to work with us or to learn more about how we can help you with strategic security testing. Thank you very much.